Got to pay the bills. Uh, and I am here today with LaVonna Roth. I know you know who this person is. She's everywhere. And we will be talking about brain powered learning. So, LaVonna, how are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Will. I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. You know, for being on the show. I see you're slumming today.
Yes, I'm slumming in my little dress and a sweater.
Well, I wasn't talking about your outfit. I was basically talking about you being on my show.
Oh,
So,
so that's what you know. See, I'm going to go with the outfit. I agree with that better.
and I'm Dr. Will. I'm not Dr. Phil. I don't have that national global Oprah backing. You know what I'm saying? So as I was saying.
He
So for the
started
folk,
somewhere.
he did. I don't know if he started in his living room, but you know. So for everyone who's watching the show, uh, will you please introduce yourself? You hear me?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I thought you said anyone listening, introduce yourself. Got it. All right, we'll get all the kinks worked out here. All right. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm LaVonna Roth, and I have the privilege of working with teachers not only around the United States, but also around the country. And one of the things I have done is really dug into brain research and how the brain learns. So it's a passion of mine that I have 3 degrees in education, and I taught for 10 years. And after all of that, I just thought, how come we don't learn how the brain learns? And I had a little bit of a background because I was a year and a half in psychology for my bachelor's, and then I changed out of that and thought, it's not really what I want. But now I look back and I thought, man, I should have stayed in that because that's such a foundation and a passion for what I have. So I'm just on a mission now where I work with teachers all across, like I said, around everywhere, weekly. I have the privilege of sharing information about brain research, how the brain learns, and then especially using that to engage learning our kids. So, it would be great if they actually remembered what we taught them. So that's my goal.
Awesome, awesome. So let's begin by defining brain-powered learning.
So there are a lot of times it's referred to as brain-based learning, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's what's often referred to as. Going into neuroscience conferences and talking to neuroscientists and such, there's kind of a little bit of joke about, okay, brain-based learning, well, what else would learning be based on besides the brain? So I took that into consideration, and I thought, okay, so what are my goals? What am I really looking for to help teachers to be able to educate our kids better? And I came up with the term brain-powered. And all I mean by that is it powerful for how the brain learns? So my whole focus is taking that neuroscience, neuropsychology, some of those components, and just laying that as a foundation. I'm not a neuroscientist or a neuropsychologist. I just have a passion for it. So, but how do we take that and then put that in the classroom so that we have kids who are engaged and they're learning at the best that they can? So that's where the term brain-powered learning or brain-powered strategies came into effect.
Mm-hmm. So why brain-powered learning over other methodologies and practices?
So when we look at what's common is traditional teaching, which is the sit and get, or we sometimes refer to it as the kill and drill. So it's one of those where, you do get information to the student's brain. They do learn some things by all means, but what I would rather see is things where kids there's high energy and they're excited and they want to learn it and they're active, and you just see that excitement and passion as well as just sitting there going, okay, let me just take notes, and there's a time and a place. I share that with teachers. There's a time and a place for the traditional setting, but for the most part, much more powerful if we would get them active into what they're learning, because the brain has multiple regions to absorb information, and the more regions we can activate, so to speak, and I'm kind of simplifying how I say this, the more areas we can activate, the better it will be for retention as well as pulling that information.
Mm. So what are the characteristics of a brain-powered learning environment?
No chairs. No, I'm kidding. So actually here in my office, I have a chair that has the ball on it, and you sit on the ball, and that's just to kind of help work your core and such. But some of the characteristics would be definitely hands-on. Charlotte Danielson has a definition for engage that I absolutely love, and she says that engagement has to be hands-on and minds-on. And I think of a brain-powered learning environment having just that. It's where it is hands-on. Kids are actively involved in things, making things, creating, standing up, doing gestures, acted outs, you name it, any way to learn that information. And then the whole thing with the minds on too. So part of what I like to talk about is that, you can be hands-on. So for example, you can be copying notes down, but if you're not thinking about what you're doing, it's not getting into here, right? If we flip that, you can be minds on, you're thinking about it, but not nearly as powerful as if it were hands on. So when I go, for example, go into a classroom and I'm going to a coach and mentor teachers and give them some feedback on some things, the number one thing I look for is movement. So to me, a brain-powered classroom is going to be one that has movement in there. The kids, like I said, are doing activities. They're allowed to stand up or sit down or lay down. And I'm not saying at any point. There has to be where they learn appropriate times. But as I share with teachers, why do students have to be sitting? Couldn't we actually teach them while they're even standing? Or small group instruction is most of the time it's around a small table, kidney-shaped table, a round table, but nobody ever said that small group instruction had to be done sitting. So I think it's kind of a combination of just what is it the kids are interested in, what can we do that's hands-on and minds-on with them, add in that movement and gestures and just really shake it up so that they can choose what's best for them to learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what is the teacher's role as well as the student's role in a brain-powered learning environment?
Check their Facebook, Instagram. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. Totally different question. The teacher, I see the teacher as sometimes they are the person, up teaching in front of the room, but I see them more as the facilitator, kind of guiding the learning and finding out right from the beginning, what is it that my students are struggling with, and letting kids be aware of that. I think it's so important to have student ownership. And that's one of the things I promote with my brain power strategies is that we want higher order thinking and such, but we want student owned thinking. So that I want teachers, for example, skipping out at the end of the day, going, okay, bubble bath, massage, what do I have time for today? Because I have so much energy and I feel great. And I want the kids dragging out behind them, exhausted with the thinking. So by giving ownership more to the students and the teachers pulling back and just kind of facilitating, giving some of those deeper questions or higher order thinking questions that kind of steer what's going on, I think that's of high value. Again, it's a combination of things. I don't believe in having one specific way to teach something or do something. I think it's a combination of different things for either smaller groups of students or you're doing it throughout a lesson so that you reach more students.
So, and this is interesting because you talked about, teachers, at the end of the day, like, hey, I had a great day. So we hear a lot about relationships in K-12 education. How does brain-powered learning enhance or add to the relationship between teacher and student?
That's a fantastic question because when you think about relationships, I sat on a plane with a gentleman beside me who I didn't realize was in education, and I was powering down my laptop, and he said, "Are you a teacher?" And I said, "Well, I used to teach." I said, "Now I teach teachers." And he said, "Oh, well, I just finished my student teaching." And I'm not lying, Dr. Will. I high-fived him and said, "You survived, congratulations." And he started cracking up laughing. And so he was quiet for a few minutes, and he said, if you give me one piece of advice, what would it be? And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, 1,000 things are going through my head. And I said, one. I said, give me a second. And I said, okay, got it. I said, it's relationships. I said, it all comes down to relationships. I don't know if you've ever heard that old adage, but I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And that's truly what happens within the brain. The brain, you have the RAS, which is the reticular activation system. And if it is on high alert, for example, maybe it's stress, concerned about where we're getting our food from, concerned mom may not come home again tonight, or we got evicted for the 3rd time, to the opposite end of 3 generations have gotten into Yale, you better as well. When we deal with those kinds of stresses and pressures, or if safety is an issue, learning's not going to happen or occur. So if you go into a classroom, for example, where you're concerned about a student who bullies you, or you have a teacher who you don't have a good relationship, as a matter of fact, you think the teacher may hate you. And I know no teacher ever has that intention, but something to be aware of. What are we conveying and communicating in those relationships? What's our body language or facial expressions saying at times when you're like, okay, do you ever miss a day of school? No, you're here every day, every day. When you have those moments with certain students that just, you're like, could you miss one day? Hopefully we're not feeling that way, but, we'll also talk a little bit about reality here. But when kids feel that way, they're not going to learn. And so when you take that relationship, it's like I explained to the gentleman on the plane. I said, when you have a relationship, now you actually can have better classroom management. And once you've got the relationship and you keep that going, you've reduced the stresses in the brain and it's ready to learn. And now you've got your classroom management. Guess what? Now you can actually teach. And to me, it kind of comes in that order. Not always, but it's a pretty close.
Okay, so I work in the world of ed tech. So let's kind of go there.
Right.
How can technology be supportive in a brain-powered learning environment, and which instructional strategies or tools do you recommend?
So with technology, I think it's a great asset for certain students, different ways to learn. And when we have students with certain special needs, there are definitely programs and apps that can assist that. And with some kids, technology can actually capture the attention and keep the attention where a human being can't, because there's some differences in the learning and how we, for example, autism and how we interact socially. So it can definitely enhance some of those things. I think, again, it's another modality, a great way for students to have access to something and to be able to say, hey, could I use the iPad, for example, or use this tablet to be able to model what I learned? And if they can do it that way, then that's the ultimate goal, is did the students learn it, and not necessarily how they learned it, but can they show that they learned it? So I will say, though, there is a little bit of caution about technology. So I do believe in moderation. That was pretty much what I mentioned earlier. That too much of a good thing can also not be a good thing. And I had at one point started, in my book, started quoting some things about technology that had been coming out, and who I had review my content to make sure that I was accurate in what I was saying said, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm actually going to ask you to pull that out. And I said, oh, and I said, so if it's not wrong, why pull it out? And he said, remember when we quote research, you always want it to be something that's long-term and done over time, and something that's really valid and continues to show itself. And so even though the technology showing may actually be consistent with certain things, we don't have the length of time to actually say whether it's a pro or a con. So I just believe, again, everything in moderation. And if a kid says, hey, can I do this? Absolutely, and introduce them to things, and they're going to have to. 21st century skills, they're going to have technology support. They're going to have to understand how to do different things with technology, so we're only setting them up for success for that too.
So we live in a very connected age. I mean, you and I, met via Twitter, and we hear a lot about individualization, personalization, and I'm all for it. But what causes me concern about it is scalability, because if you teach teachers, if you work with teachers and you coach teachers and you start to do those walkthrough and classes, you see those classes where everything is amazing. And then you see those classes where you go, okay, like what just happened here? And you start to wonder, like, what's the disconnect between over here and over there? And so how can a brain-based learning environment be scaled across a school and a district, especially when we start to take into account the individual strengths of teachers, who one methodology may quite honestly work better for them than something else?
Right, and that is the magical question right there. So I'm gonna let you answer that one. No, I'm kidding. No, you're right, and I think a lot of it comes down to differences in personality and comfort zone. So I always encourage teachers to, you have that certain circle and you tend to stand in that circle, and that's our little comfort zone. But the way we model for students to grow and take risks and to fail, which I personally believe that you only fail when you don't do anything with it, when you don't learn from it to grow further. But by taking some of those risks, teachers are also modeling that. So I encourage them, for example, to take one step out. You don't have to take a leap out. You don't have to change everything you're doing, but take one step out that's going to grow you and make it for the better for the students, because that's the ultimate, that's the end of it all. Is this what's in the best interest of students? And if you can say yes, then there's no excuse to not do it. So step that foot out, give it a shot, have a support system to help you, and then keep expanding that circle further and further. You know, and individualization and personalization is becoming really big in education. I'm watching different, and hearing about different teachers who are really owning that. And I think sometimes it takes others just a little longer to say, oh, what is this? And is this the right thing? You know, sometimes when it's new, we're just not sure. Like, it sounds like a good thing, but in theory, but outside of that, is it really? And I think it's a great opportunity for teachers to be able to go and observe other teachers. And, you know, I say, for example, go observe a teacher. And if there's like one thing, even at least, but one thing that you say, you know what, that's a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I could try that, and go for it. And but don't forget that the first time it may flop. I remember the first time when first of all, I taught middle school. And then when I went to second grade, I like panicked because I was in culture shock going, what do you mean you don't know how to tie your shoe? Because I was used to 7th and 8th graders, and I had these second graders. And it was one of those that was just a little bit like, wait, hold on, you know? And I remember thinking, wait, I have to do centers. And the first time I did centers, I remember swearing I would never, ever, ever do centers again. This is a bunch of baloney. There's no classroom management. And then I stopped and I went, oh, wait, I'm the teacher. I'm the one that this is the problem with. And I have the problem with classroom management. And it's my job to figure out how to make this work. And centers ended up working beautifully. But, you know, again, it's a lot of times we try things the first time, it's not going to come out great. So as a teacher, you know, if you're struggling with expanding and trying some of these new ideas and you feel like there's so many new things coming and demands and you can't keep up, that's okay. Take that step out and say, okay, what is something today I can do that will make me better as a teacher? And then tomorrow I'm going to refine that. And the next day refine it even more. And then maybe the next day I say, you know what, I'm ready for something else, or a month later, whatever it may be. But if we're really truly serving kids, because that's what we are, servants to kids, then that's our job, is to find out, how do I get out of my comfort zone and make it work? But yeah, scalability is a big issue. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm grappling with right now, and particularly since I am responsible for leading the one-to-one implementation at the high school, and we're starting out with the 9th grade. And so for me, in my training and where I want to see teachers grow and mature and get better, I'm thinking now, but I'm also trying to think, how can I create systems that when the one-to-one goes 9th and 10th, I have a process where I know that will work, not only with training, but, you know, things teachers can do with Schoology, etc., and get that, you know, so, because I don't want to look up and it's 9 through 12 and it's chaos. If I still have a job, if it's chaos, but you know, and that those things with scale are things that haunt me, because it's how do we get this going well, and then how do we reproduce that and make that where we can scale it and have a model to where, as the one-to-one expands to other schools in the district, we have a blueprint and a framework to say, you know, let's try it this way.
Right. Well, I think that based on hearing your passion and how much you care about that, you know, just asking teachers along the way, saying what's working for you, what's not working for you, how could we better do this? Did I jump the gun too fast by getting these out and you're not feeling comfortable with it? Even offering, you know, small group time, or a time where you say, hey, these are my office hours, come on in, and would love to chat with you about what's going well, what's not going well. You're just being receptive, and I think that's a great leadership technique. But yeah, kudos to you, because that's a big task, and knowing that's going to go to other schools too. But I just, again, from hearing you talk and what I do know of you, I have this feeling that, you know, it's going to go really well because you do care and you pay attention to that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And if you have time, call the superintendent. Let him know I'm awesome.
All right, let him watch the show.
I'll just play it. Yeah, he's a great person. He's a great person. So before we go, for those people who may watch the show, I hope you watch the show, and they're like, okay, this sounds awesome, but I'm still apprehensive, or there's fear, and they don't know where to start. They don't. I mean, they're like, oh, okay, how do I begin? Where does my process begin? What advice do you have for them to sort of begin that process of transitioning from what they are doing now to that brain powered learning environment?
So a couple of things I would say is, baby steps. So we talked about the comfort circle, but do it in baby steps. Again, don't expect yourself to be a master tomorrow, and don't expect to change everything. So finding what is one thing when you think about brain powered learning and you look at, okay, I want to add in gestures, or I want to add in movement, or maybe more patterns in organizations, so such as graphic organizers or thinking maps are very common out there. Or maybe that you say, okay, personal connection. I want to get to know my kids better so that when I teach, I can bring in some more of the personal connection. And so what I'm pulling from right now is some of the keys to memory retention that work. So if you look at some of those, and my books have those things in them too, or they can reach out to me through Twitter and any other avenue by just Google me, you'll find me. That's the crazy thing about Google these days, but and find information, and I'm happy to help some of those key pieces. So, you may say, whoa, LaVonna, if I get kids out of my seat or out of their seat, do you know what they do? Absolutely not. Okay, then fine. Maybe that's not the place to start at first. But knowing the goal is to be able to get kids up out of their seat, even if it's at their desk, to eventually interacting with, for example, one of my strategies called the kinesthetic word web, where they get up and they physically make these word webs, and then we really do some cool things with questioning with them. So, but that may be something your goal is to get to eventually, because right now that's just not where you are. So I'd say those baby steps. And then the second thing is set up a support system, be that connected educator. So whether it's someone in your building, someone in a different grade level elsewhere, someone on Twitter, maybe connect with them through Facebook, there's so many avenues now. Even Voxer is a phenomenal app. To be able to have conversations with one person or group of people, but have that support system. Say, okay, this is what I'm willing to try. I need some feedback on this. I need some support, and I also need some accountability, because if it doesn't go well, I know me, and I'm going to pull back. So just someone that'll be there to encourage them and hold them accountable too.
Awesome. Thank you, LaVonna, for being such a great guest. Folks, no show next week. I will actually be at a conference presenting. But the week after that, we have part of our diversity series in education. We'll be talking about diversity in ed tech with Jordan Pedraza, who works for Remind now, but used to work at Google. So, folks, thank you for watching the show. And if you see LaVonna on Twitter, say hey.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Will. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And then, as always, folks, be you, EDU, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.